Everyone knows there are no winners in a war, and the Russia-Ukrainian war is no different. Russia obviously knew what it was getting into when it decided to invade Ukrainian territories, but things are not going exactly as planned. The soldiers are protesting because they haven't been paid what was promised, the economy is crumbling, people are fleeing the country, and it looks like Russia is on the verge of collapsing. So what exactly is happening in Russia, and why is it on the brink of collapsing? On February 24, 2022, Russian President Vladimir Putin announced that he was sending in troops of Russian soldiers on a mission to demilitarize Ukraine. When Putin made his announcement, he insisted that the troops were embarking on a special military operation. Most people thought it would end in a few weeks, a month, or two tops. But they thought wrong. The special military operation has grown to become the biggest land war in Europe since World War II, with thousands of civilians killed in both countries. It has forced about 8 million Ukrainians out of their home and crushed the Ukrainian economy. But Russia has also suffered greatly from their unnecessary invasion. When Putin announced his intentions, many got on the street to protest because they knew it would ruin everything. But the Russian government didn't hear their pleas. In fact, draconian laws were passed in February to ensure that nobody would criticize the military or leadership. When the war started, many political activists, civil society workers, and journalists who knew they would face a high risk of persecution by the Russian government due to their opinions of the war fled the country. Those who went ahead to protest or voice their opinions have been detained, while some have been given lengthy prison sentences, which amount to about 20,000 people. Most of them are women, so those living in Russia are living worse lives than before. The country's internet regulator has blocked about 100,000 websites due to claims that the sites spread fake news. Social media such as Twitter and Facebook have been banned so that people from around the world won't really know what's going on in Russia. And they continue to put up the "everything is fine" front. But things are not fine, as the Russian military is struggling. The Russian military is one of the most feared in the world for obvious reasons. And everyone thought they would crush the Ukrainians with a twinkle of an eye because they were larger and had more ammunition. Still, a spider can bring down an elephant, right? The Ukrainian military has not defeated the Russians but has strongly proven that Putin underestimated them. Shortly after the war started, the Russian government took over about 4 Ukrainian territories and created an unrecognized referendum. The Russian military was glad, but Ukraine started reclaiming those territories in September. Kherson, a major city seized by Russia, was reclaimed when the Ukrainian military retaliated and pushed out the Russian military in November. Besides that, the Russian efforts to conquer Kiev, Ukraine's capital or the second major city of Kiev, have proved abortive. When Putin realized he had underestimated the Ukrainians, he decided to draft civilians into the military. When he announced the drafting, hundreds of thousands of Russian men fled the country. Trains and planes sold out all the tickets going to Georgia, Finland, Kazakhstan, and Mongolia. Some even fled by car when they couldn't get tickets. Those unable to flee took to the streets to protest despite the draconian laws passed, and the Russian police didn't hesitate to arrest them. About 1,300 people got arrested, which has caused civil unrest as they've begun to feel the impact of the war more than before. The Russians who have died during the war in 2022 are officially at about 6,000. But most people estimate it to be more than that. Several Russian infrastructures have suffered great hits due to the war, including the important bridge connecting Russia to Crimea. On January 2, 2023, a Ukrainian strike on the Russian military facility in the eastern town of Makiivka killed 63 troops residing there. It was a retaliation to Russia's attack on New Year's Day 2023. Russian residents are no longer confident in the abilities of the Russian military, and those who can flee are leaving. Even the Russian military held protests in late 2022 because they had not been paid all that they were promised before the war started. Things are not going as planned for anyone in Russia. The citizens are disturbed, and the country's economy has also taken a hit. To the layman, the war is between Russia and Ukraine, but it's more than that. The actual war might be fought in Ukraine, but it has spread beyond Ukrainian shores because most Western countries are strongly behind Ukraine, and Russia is suffering for it. The Western countries and Russia had a civil relationship before the war started. They were not particularly friends, but had a fairly good relationship because Russia had oil and gas to sell while the countries needed to buy from them. But as soon as the military troops stepped into Ukraine, the Western countries turned their backs on Russia, and it was hit with heavy sanction packages. Many foreign multi-billion-dollar businesses left the country to show solidarity with Ukraine, and Russia's economy shook. Many expected that the sanctions would have an immediate critical effect on the Russian economy, but Russia has oil and gas, so that didn't happen. Initially, when the sanctions were placed by the Western countries, it isolated Russia and left it with close to no allies. The sanctions included a freeze on Russia's foreign reserves, restrictions on essential supplies that got through trade, and mainly blocking the country's access to the world. Experts immediately presumed that Russia would crumble under such an effect. In fact, the value of the Russian ruble dropped, and the country's economic value dropped by 15%, but Russia turned things around. They were a major supplier of oil and gas to European countries, so they created sanctions of their own, and the countries who created sanctions first ended up struggling with Russia's sanctions. They sold fuel at very high prices, and the ruble's value rose higher than the pre-war level. The country made $100 billion from fuel exports in the first 100 days after the invasion. The interesting part is that it earned more money from selling less oil. Although the US cut them off, Russia could generate revenue by selling more to China and India. But their countermeasures against the Western countries didn't work for long, and things are starting to change for the Russian economy. The high demand for fuel has begun to reduce, so the prices would inevitably reduce. OPEC is also not helping matters as they keep cutting supply. The European countries that couldn't stop patronizing Russia initially began to slow down their purchase before December 22, with plans to stop it altogether at the end of the year. China and India, whose patronage Russia banked on, also began slowing their purchase. They had purchased so much from the beginning of the war because Russia had sold to them at a discounted rate. But because fuel prices had decreased and because of low demands, Russia could no longer sell them at such rates. There is also the thing about the oil price cap. Joe Biden is considering applying an oil price cap using insurance companies to allow countries that need Russian oil to get it without being asked to pay ridiculously high prices. The USA and Europe control 90% of the insurance market, and you need to be insured to ship oil. Most of the oil around the globe is shipped through waterways, and the ships need insurance to set sail, or else they wouldn't be granted permission. The Russian economy will seriously be affected if the price cap isn't enforced. For gas, it's transported through pipelines, and since their main buyers are European countries, the pipelines are directed toward those countries. Now that European countries have cut their gas purchase, Russia would struggle because even if it finds new buyers, there is no infrastructure to supply as much gas as it does to European countries. There's also a rumor about the Russian oil reserve being exhausted in 2023. The sanctions placed on the country by the Western countries prevent the importation of microchips, the soul of every technology and other necessities. Without that equipment and goods, the country's aviation and automotive industry will be pushed back decades, and it will severely affect the economy. Besides the external forces that threaten to crumble the Russian economy, there are internal forces. For the first time in a long time, able-bodied men are fleeing the country. It was reported that about 300,000 left when the war was initially announced. But when Putin started conscripting civilians into the military, several more left. That means the country is also losing human resources. If there are no people to do certain tasks in the country will feel its brunt. With all these facts, things are not going as planned for Russia, and the country is also suffering severely from Putin's rash decisions. Will Putin back down and end the war before the country's economy crumbles? Or is everything going as he planned? We'll know in time. Well, thank you for watching till the end. Kindly like and subscribe to our channel, and we hope to see you in the next video.